Oh, what a week it has been for the Washington Commanders. Thanks for joining us. This is a special report. I am Darren Haynes here with Charlotte McBride, Adam Lungo, and Eric Flack. Now, we're streaming live on the WUSA9 app, WUSA9 Plus, on Roku, Fire TV, YouTube, and Facebook.
Everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere if you are watching us. So we want you to tweet us, comment on our Facebook stream. We'll be reading your comments on this show.
Yeah, we got lots to talk about, but here are three big things that you need to know. One, that bombshell report from ESPN claiming that Dan Snyder had dug up, quote, dirt on NFL owners. That sent Commanders country into a tailspin.
Yeah, two, the NFL owners meeting in New York where Colts owner Jim Irsay told me it's time for Dan Snyder to go.
And three, another QB injury. Carson Wentz with a broken finger, which means Taylor Heineke will be stepping up under center.
All right, so let's go back to last night to get you guys all caught up on this. WUSA9 was the only local station at the NFL owners meetings in New York, and the day really blew up when Colts owner Jim Irsay told me this.
In your opinion, do you feel Dan Snyder is good for the league?
Well, again, from the things that I've heard, I want to hold my final opinion. You know, it's a difficult situation. You know, I believe that there's merit to remove him as owner of the Redskins. I think it's something that we have to review. We have to look at all the evidence, and we have to be thorough in going forward.
How many people do you think will support how you feel out of all the other owners?
I believe they'll support it if the report shows and they believe it's the right thing to do.
Now, the Colts owner doubled down today on his comments, tweeting, "You got to stand for something or you're going to fall for anything." Now, Mr. Irsay made it clear yesterday he has daughters and granddaughters and wants to stand up for what is right. Now, the Commanders put out a statement about 20 minutes after Jim Irsay said those comments yesterday, saying it is highly inappropriate but not surprising that Mr. Irsay opted to make statements publicly based on falsehoods in the media. It is unfortunate that Mr. Irsay decided to go public with his statement today while an investigation is in process, and the team has had no opportunity to formally respond to allegations. So we have our full panel here. I like to say it's almost like Voltron. You're the arm, you're the arm, we're both the legs. Together, we're the whole body.
Yeah.
But
it's a big story. You need a lot of people to cover it.
Absolutely. So let's start off with you, Charlotte. Ladies first. What was your reaction when you heard Jim Irsay made those comments?
You know what? It wasn't really my reaction right then. It was 24 hours later today. And what struck me the most is that every other owner stayed silent, and I think silence speaks volumes. No one came to defend Dan Snyder in this, which tells me maybe they all agree.
Yeah,
Right.
go ahead, Adam.
I thought based on that, it was quite telling that Irsay said he thought that he had the majority of team owners needed to be able to remove Snyder, yet nobody else stepped up and said anything. So when we kept hearing reports that there might be a majority of owners, he was the only one saying it.
Yeah.
So let's keep in mind, this is a single source report that we're talking about here.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, let's flip the script, though. Is it at all possible that behind closed doors they said, Jim, you get out
You're
there
the
first
speaker.
because he's had the checkered past? There was the threat, allegedly, from Dan Snyder to dig up dirt on the other owners. Nobody probably has more dirt out there right now than Jim Irsay. And was it calculated for Irsay to come out and say, investigate me all you want, you're going?
So I think that's probably one of the things that happened. My take on all of this, I feel that Jim Irsay is probably one of those owners that maybe doesn't have the best relationship with Dan Snyder. And he maybe came to the point where he had something to say and he wanted us to hear it. There are a lot of owners at these NFL meetings, you know, they walk right past us. They don't want to talk to us. Usually they stop when they have something they want to say. And Jim Irsay had something to say, and he took about 10 to 12 minutes of us asking questions about Dan Snyder, and he was answering them all. And even at one point, Jim was Jim's PR person was like, hey, do you want to go back upstairs? And he's like, no, I'm okay, and answered 3 or 4 more questions.
He had made a decision beforehand that he was going to answer questions that he knew was going to be asked of all of them.
Yes,
Which
correct.
begged more questions of, was there going to be a wider discussion among the owners about Dan Snyder? And if not at this meeting, does it certainly set it up and posture it for the next meeting for there possibly to be action?
But keep in mind what Goodell said, that Darren reported yesterday as well. He said that he was answering questions of the owners behind closed doors, right? And said, we need to wait for the Mary Jo White report to come out before jumping to any conclusions. So that told me that there was at least some discussion behind closed doors on this issue.
Yeah, I also feel like Jim Irsay spoke because he wanted to speak. And then after, probably there was a meeting saying, hey, owners, Jim just did this. Let's not say anything else. Because even when Jerry Jones came out, you know, he didn't want to really make a comment. We'll hear from that later. Also, the thing about what Jim Irsay said was when it came down to the ESPN report in regards to the accusations of Dan Snyder having dirt on these owners, you know, we asked Jim Irsay that, and he was just like, I don't care. Like, I don't have anything to worry about.
His dirty laundry is already out there.
But he made it very clear that he really feels that there are enough owners that if it came to the point in time that the owners need to have those 24 possible votes to remove Dan Snyder from ownership, he feels like there are enough owners that feel that way. And that was a very powerful, strong statement. It's just what you're saying, Eric Flack, that they're waiting for this Mary Jo White investigation to be completed.
Almost so they say, okay, we've followed the rules, we've done our due diligence, we've given you time, now time's up.
They have the Wilkinson report. I mean, not in paper form, right? But the one that the NFL did and that Roger Goodell spoke about. So the other owners know all of the underlays of what's happening. So
do the other owners have access to the Wilkinson report, though? So please educate me.
No, I don't know, but I think you would agree, Charlotte, that there's one. The commissioner, he's paid by the owners. He's the guy who's.
So they're all in league together. They all share this information.
Correct.
I have to assume.
But it was an oral report.
That's
that was
correct.
The whole reason that.
But we don't know if I worked for you, right? And wouldn't you want to know if I'm doing an investigation on what I have?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
Who knows? Now, a lot of people, when we went to the NFL owners meetings after the meetings were over, the Commanders representative sent this letter to us.
This is wild.
This is a letter that
this is
that
crazy.
It was written by Dan Snyder. I mean, it's not signed, but it's sincerely Dan Snyder. He wasn't at the NFL owners meetings. Tanya Snyder was the representative. But basically, in this letter, it talks about the ESPN article that accuses Mrs. Snyder of hiring private investigators to look into other owners and Commissioner Roger Goodell. The letter from Mr. Snyder says it's false and malicious, and that the report is diminishing the real change the team is making. And here are some of the other owners when talking about or asked about Dan Snyder.
I've said I have no knowledge of anything, and I brought up in the article, I have no knowledge of anything that has got any basis to it, period.
How do you feel like some of the other owners feel about Dan Snyder?
You'll have to ask them.
Jim Irsay says that he feels that Dan Snyder should be removed from ownership. Do you feel the same way?
Robert. All right, thank you.
Are you surprised? Are you disappointed that Jim Irsay had strong comments about it? No.
Do you feel that Dan Snyder is good for the league?
I feel that everyone deserves the opportunity to make sure that they know the facts. So speculation is not beneficial. I feel that strongly in my heart.
Now, there have been a ton of accusations thrown out against Snyder and the team, so we want to get their perspective.
Right. So we're going to ask them right now. Joining us right now, John Brownlee, legal counsel for the Washington Commanders. John, we had a chance to speak last week. It's good to see you again. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's good to see you as well, and thank you.
Yeah, John, what was your reaction when you heard the comments from Colts owner Jim Irsay at the owners' meetings?
Yes, well, it was just very unfortunate that he decided at that moment to put out that statement while he admitted that he simply just didn't know the facts, right? It was a little bit odd for him to come out with a statement about how he viewed an investigation without any knowledge of the actual investigation. He acknowledged that it was based on media reports, which we know are quite suspect, and we've talked about a lot of that. And so, it's really important for people to kind of slow down, to wait for the investigation to be completed, to evaluate all the evidence before anyone makes a decision. That's what I would expect, that's what you would expect, and that's what the Snyders expect. I also think it's problematic for another reason. The NFL is a unique group of people, and it has a constitution, and that constitution prohibits in many ways the types of detrimental statements Mr. Irsay made. That type of conduct can be very detrimental to the league when you rush out and say those kinds of things without really knowing any of the facts. So, the commission was right. He needs to hold steady, wait, properly evaluate the evidence, and then he can make his own judgment. I have to tell you, I am confident that if he were to actually do that, then he will come to the same conclusions that we've come to, that the Snyders have done nothing wrong, that the allegations against them are baseless. And again, we can talk about those. I know we have in the past, and that they'll continue to be successful owners, longtime owners of an NFL franchise. So we're hopeful that happens.
And have you spoken specifically to Dan and Tanya Snyder? I know that you guys are very close. You told me that last week. What have they specifically said about these comments from him?
I think the Snyders are looking for what everybody else would, and that's just a fair shot. Mm-hmm. And they know what the actual facts are. They know that these media reports, like this ESPN report, that was just a true fabrication. It was based on a bunch of anonymous sources, individuals with their own personal axes to grind. And so, they're just looking for fairness, like you would look for, like I would. And, we're hopeful that this process provides that. So we'll just have to wait and see.
John, this is Eric Flack. In the past, Mr. Snyder has taken legal action against entities that he felt unfairly maligned his name. Is this a situation where Mr. Snyder, the team, is considering legal action against ESPN for this bombshell article that kicked off so much of this?
Yeah, I think, we're kind of in a wait and see pattern on that. We're certainly going to take a look at it. It certainly is problematic. We had a chance to talk to the reporters, or at least one of them, beforehand. We told them that these allegations were false, so they knew that. So they kind of knowingly printed something that they knew to be false. It was all based on anonymous sources and the like. But what I think most important right now is trying not to be a distraction to the season, to the team, to the coaches, what's really important. There's plenty of time for those kinds of considerations. But right now, you've got a lot of players, a lot of coaches, a lot of employees of the team who are working very hard to try to put wins on the field and run a successful company. And that's really what Dan and Tanya are focused on.
John, Adam Longo, you all are having to deal, you all being Dan Snyder's legal team, having to juggle multiple things. You've got the Irsay comments, you've got investigations that are ongoing from the attorneys general of at least D.C. and Virginia. Right. I specifically wanted to ask you about the House Oversight Committee and its investigation. I think we'd probably agree it is likely we will see the work product of their investigation play out sometime before the end of the year, before a new Congress is seated in early January. Do you have any expectation of what that work product might look like? I mean, you all have described it as a hatchet job, a political hatchet job. I'm sure you're not going to be pleased with whatever comes out of it, but what are your expectations?
Sure. Well, you described a process that seemed pretty complicated, and quite frankly, it's very simple. We've had a chance to review these allegations, and there's just no evidence to support any of them. I mean, that's the easy part of this from a lawyer's perspective. Before I joined a law firm, I was a federal prosecutor for about 11 years. And so I've done a lot of these kinds of investigation. And this one just has nothing there. Again, you have allegations from 17 years ago. The complaining witness in that case, you really can't pinpoint when it happened. At one time, it was like a 2-year window. Now it's like spring of 05 or 06 or something. And so, these are the kinds of things that people do. They're political type things, particularly in the Congress. I have no idea when we'll get a report. Who knows? I'm sure it's based on a political calendar and not on some sort of legal calendar. And so, again, we know what didn't happen. We know the truth. We know the facts because we've looked at them. And the letter that we sent to Congress a couple of weeks ago was really important because what we said is that you haven't done a thorough investigation. I mean, remember, they've done this pseudo investigation, but they've never actually talked to anyone who presently works at the team. I mean, that's just bizarre. And yet my guess is they'll put out some scathing report with a bunch of innuendo and hearsay and allegations from, decades ago. And it's a political document. So we understand what it's all about. We understand that these are valuable franchises, extremely valuable franchises that a lot of people want. And so you've got a media who has, at least some parts of it, have been willing to kind of print these false statements, allow these sources to remain anonymous, so you really can't test their veracity. All the troubling signs of unfairness, and we're just having to deal with it.
Now, in terms of the Mary Jo White investigation, can you tell us, has Dan Snyder spoken to her or her team as part of this investigation? Are there plans for perhaps him or Tanya to do it again, or anyone else with the team?
Right. He has not spoken to Mary Jo White. As you know, he was deposed by Congress for 11 hours, I guess at the end of July now. So, which is pretty remarkable. If you think about that, in the federal system, if you have a true federal lawsuit, you're allowed 7 hours to depose an individual, a witness. In this case, Congress decided to take 11 hours. They were asking some of the most ridiculous questions, and we're hopeful that at some point they will release his transcript. They have a hold on that transcript. We have encouraged them to go ahead and release it. We think the public should see it. I think Dan did a great job. He was truthful. He was forthright. He did his best to try to answer their questions, despite the fact they were asking about events from 10, 12 years ago. So we'll see what happens with that. But he certainly has answered everyone's questions. In fact, the last thing they said at the end of that deposition was, "I have no further questions." And so he's done his best to cooperate with that investigation and answered every single question they had.
John, just to follow up, you mentioned that Dan Snyder hasn't participated in the Mary Jo White investigation?
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say he hasn't participated. I've said he hasn't spoken to her yet.
Oh, hasn't spoken to her yet, but that is planned. That will happen.
I don't know that. I guess it just depends.
You would certainly want. You would certainly want to have him.
But at some point, I'm assuming if she wants to talk to him, he'll cooperate, and he's pledged his cooperation there. I know that the records that they've asked for, we've produced, and so we'll continue to cooperate.
Now, for John, the Oversight Committee investigation, Dan Snyder, he wanted to testify. He wanted to, do this the interview with the Congress. Why isn't Dan Snyder willingly wanting to, let's just say, talk to Mary Jo White on his own doing if he hasn't done anything wrong to help out this investigation?
Well, Mary Jo White kind of runs her investigation. So when she is prepared and ready to talk to a particular witness, she will reach out and ask that witness to talk to him, and I'm sure they will, as he will. So it really is up to her as opposed to him kind of knocking on her door. It typically works the other way, much like Congress. When they ask, we want to depose you, we scheduled it, and it happened.
But there's no way there could be a complete investigation from Mary Jo White without her or her team talking to Dan Snyder, correct?
I wouldn't think so. But again, she kind of runs that. I know that Dan spoke with Beth Wilkinson twice, I think 2 hours apiece. And so I fully cooperated with that investigation. And so, he's going to continue to cooperate as best he can, and we'll just see what what comes up.
John, last week I asked you if Dan Snyder would ever consider just selling the team, giving it up.
Right.
I know your answer was no then. Now
Right.
We've heard what Irsay has said. What is Dan Snyder? What is his answer now?
Yeah, it's the same. The Snyders love the team. They love the community. They love the players and the coaches and the employees of the team, the staff, the leadership, and they love the NFL. And so, I think if you just kind of focus on those things, what's really important, you will get through all of this. Again, you kind of control what you can. We can't control that ESPN turns over its pretty remarkable network. It's got such a great history to a bunch of anonymous sources with their own access to grind, and then hides behind that. We're now about a week away from that story being published. I think it was last Thursday. And even after a week, Not one person has come forward to corroborate any of that. You think about that. I mean, they said that Dan had hired these private investigators to go. None of that is true. Okay. And no one has come forward to corroborate it. There's no email, text message, anything to try to support that fabrication. And yet ESPN obviously felt comfortable pushing their narrative and trying to get it out. So, you know, a story like that really says a lot more about ESPN than it does about Dan and Tanya Snyder. But that's the world we live in. That's the media that we have, and we just have to kind of live with it and understand that those are the rules, particularly for public figures, and try to, you know, live your life the best you can, despite the fact that these kinds of things are going to happen.
John, we just have a couple more questions for you, and I have to just mention me working at ESPN in the past, knowing how the way they handle business, and they always fact-checked certain things. And then in addition to the 40-something employees that are represented by Lisa Banks, and there's some other former employees that, you know, they've signed the NDA, so they can't necessarily speak. Why do you believe that all these people are making up these false accusations about Dan Snyder?
Well, a couple things. First of all, nobody has been prevented from answering any questions of either Beth Wilkinson or Mary Jo White because of an NDA, or Congress for that matter. So that's been a kind of a red herring that they pushed from day one. And I think you all know that. The second thing is, when you say all these people, why would they be lying? You know, the reality is we don't know who all those people are, right? When you have 30, according to them, 30 anonymous sources. And again, those sources as defined are NFL executives, lawyers, former employees, who knows who they are?
Yeah, but you have some former.
The reality is, as you well know, let's say I were to make an accusation against you. Let's say I were to come forward and say, and somebody were to accuse you of say, cheating on a test in college. And you were to say, well, I didn't cheat on a test in college. You would say, well, what test? Well, I can't remember. Well, when did it happen? Well, I can't remember. Well, what class was it? I can't remember. Right? And that's what we face. And so, and then they would say, well, who's making the allegation? Well, I'm not going to tell you. So think about how that would be effective of your own life. I can't imagine any reporter at ESPN or any other media source who would want to be treated the way that this family's been treated, or would think that that treatment is fair. No one would. And if I described how they have been treated, you all would say, well, that's not fair. And yet that's what they're subjected to. So again, you know, people are going to make their own judgments about folks. They're public folks, and they understand that. But again, I just think, is it really fair? Is this the way we want to conduct ourselves? And do you, based on this type of evidence, are you going to trust it? Are you going to find it reliable? And I think not.
But you know, we also have to make note that there are some of the former employees that have publicly spoke, that their names are out there, like Tiffany Johnston or Melanie Coburn, that have gone on the record. I think that probably one is too many, if those accusations are true.
I just want to close on this, and thank you for being so generous with your time, John. But you know, Charlotte touched on it. You have been very clear that the Snyders have no intention of selling the team, nor do you believe that the owners will force Mr. Snyder to sell the team. But attendance is at an all-time low. The team's success is at an all-time low. In all due respect, Mr. Snyder's popularity has never been so low. What is the vision that you can see sitting here tonight where Dan Snyder can remain the owner of the Washington Commanders and bring it back to the type of success that he had when he took over the team? How is that even possible with the amount of fan angst and anger at him? How does that ever change?
Right. Well, that's a great question, and I appreciate it. And I want to address it in a couple of ways. First of all, I don't know if you know AJ Perez. He's a reporter at Front Office Sports, and AJ has published some articles of fairly critical articles of the team and of Dan Snyder. And apparently, he was doing some research today on a story about some payment of vendors, and he ran across a vendor. And this was independent of us. I just saw it on his Twitter feed earlier today. And when he was talking about this vendor, he was trying to determine if the team had been paying her time. And she said yes, but then she recounted a story that I had never heard. And this was when, I think in 2007 or 8, her husband was killed in a car accident, and Dan learned about it. And on his own, quietly, no press, no fanfare, paid for her son's college education. And she told the reporter that today, and he put it out on his Twitter feed, to his credit. I mean, those are the kinds of things that you learn about people, and it does change your perception of them. And this is the whole person. And so as you look towards a vision, you know, these are the kinds of leaders, Dan and Tanya, who have made remarkable progress on the team over the last 2 years. They have the most diverse front office management team of any team in the league. They have Jason Wright, and just a remarkable group of people who are now kind of leading the team. They have a fantastic coach. They have some exciting players. And they're committed to trying to build a front office that's the model of the league, and then they're going to try to do it on the field as well. As you well know, winning in the NFL is tough. I mean, the Dallas Cowboys, who won a bunch of Super Bowls back in the 90s, haven't been, I don't even think that team has been to an NFC championship game in 25 years.
They still fill the stadium, though. I mean, they still fill the stadium, though, John.
I think they do, and I think that the goals here are to try to fill this stadium and to try to get folks back there and to try to put a team out there that can win. And so, you know, that's kind of a week-by-week thing. I know they're improving, but the transformation of the team in the last couple of years has really been remarkable, and it's been done under their leadership and with a lot of other great folks, including Jason. And so I think the team today is something to be proud of. It is a difficult time, no doubt, and but I think they're strong. They're going to weather this storm. And our hope is that they can get a win on Sunday.
Yeah, they give credit where credit's due. I mean, Jason Wright and Ron Rivera definitely are doing some positive things to help change the culture and make the team a lot better. John Brownlee, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
for
John.
answering our questions.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And obviously, this won't be the last time that we speak to you, because there are some there's some reports that are going to be coming out soon in regards to a couple investigations. But have a good night.
Thank you. Appreciate you all. Good night.
Good night.
All right, so just a quick debrief on what we just heard there, because obviously we were talking to the Commanders' legal counsel for a long period of time, so a lot to process here.
Yeah, I think one of the things that he mentioned, and that they keep cycling back to, I say they in terms of the lawyers when it comes to responding to the investigations, and that is they're talking about the culture shift within the organization that's unfolded in the past several years, whereby all of these investigations that are unfolding are about things that have happened in the past. Does that make them less palatable? Should we not be investigating them? Of course not. But I think one of the big things that the attorneys, including John, there are falling back on is these are things in the past. Why don't we just move on? We've changed a lot of things. Things are better now.
And I go ahead, Fleck.
Well, no, I mean, it's the only possible defense that they can have at some point.
Focus on today's culture.
This is not the problem anymore. The problem is that more and more of these incidents that we didn't know about are coming to light. Yeah. And it's hard to escape your past. It just is really hard to escape your past. And I think that we have seen that change is not always the medicine to fixing the mistakes of the past. Sure. It's great that they have changed. I believe that the culture at the Washington Commanders is not as toxic as it was back in
Absolutely. We're
the
there
days.
majority of the time. We see the change, obviously.
The change. Ron Rivera, big changes. Jason Wright, big changes. We said that. Yeah, it has changed.
And I want to ask you guys, because I mean, I gave John an opportunity to address this, and we got a response that you would expect. Hey, we're going to turn this around. Dan has been nice to a couple people over the years, and we've got another number of great stories that he doesn't even tell you about. He's a good guy. Do you see any way that this team is ever a success with the fans, on the field, off the field, with Dan Snyder as owner?
I'm sorry, I was looking at this video. Say that again.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah, repeat your question.
No, I just want to, John said it's possible for this team to return to its glory days with Dan Snyder as owner? Is that
Darren just gave a big eye roll.
No, I'm trying. No, well, I'm trying to understand. You're
trying not to laugh out loud?
No, I'm trying. Well, give me the question.
I mean, it has to come through an image rehabilitation program.
Do you
right?
think that's actually possible at this point, or is the toothpaste so far out of the tube that there's no putting it back?
What's possible?
That this team can be a success and a healthy
support for the team
organization
again,
with
Yes.
support in the community with Dan Snyder as owner?
Yes and no. I think Ron Rivera has a lot of control over the team, and if that becomes very successful and the team is winning, let's just say they've won 3
Yes.
Super Bowls in a row, I think a lot of the fans could maybe come to the point where they
Winning
can care less
changes a lot of people's
who the particular owner is.
Right.
I think it's you have a lot of fans, and you're from here, so you understand this, that are just are upset in regards to the product that's on the field. And then all of a sudden, the track record of when Dan Snyder took over ownership and how things have declined. So you have a lot of upset fans, and they feel like, if anything's going to change, it needs to start from way up top. And that's why they kind of go after Dan Snyder.
I think so. I think you're absolutely right. I think winning can change people's minds a little bit. Yeah, let's just say they win every single game for the rest of the season. Well, people might, not forget about what's going on, but as you said, these longtime fans that just want to see a winning team, a winning program, you start winning.
In terms of turning things around, though, one of the things that we just heard from John Brownlee that to me, frankly, was astonishing is that Dan Snyder has not spoken to Mary Jo White.
He said
yet.
he has participated,
Right.
which
handing
I
over
assume
documents to the leader of the team.
But
So we're all under the impression that this Mary Jo White investigation could wrap up at any time. How could it if she hasn't talked to Dan Snyder?
That is when I heard that, I was you and I think probably looked at each other where how can you finish this Mary Jo White investigation that is about accusations about Dan Snyder
Without talking
about the team and everything.
to Dan Snyder.
Without talking to Dan Snyder.
Yeah.
And that we've come this far that he has not spoken.
Right.
To shouldn't that be one of the first things
Well,
you
not
do?
always, because sometimes, especially when there's allegations, you want to get all your ducks in a row and have all your investigation complete, and then you bring the focus of that investigation at the end. So if he or she says something, you're not tripped up by something you didn't know about by doing a thorough investigation.
And we'll be coming up on a year in February of 2023 of the NFL hiring Mary Jo White, a former U.S. attorney, to investigate all of these allegations against Dan Snyder and the Commanders, and saying, Roger Goodell, in the hiring of Mary Jo White, there will be a written report. She is going to investigate this and have liberties to do that, and then we'll issue a report when she's done. But it doesn't look like that is coming anytime soon if you haven't talked to Dan Snyder.
I think not.
Well, what I do know, speaking to some of the former Washington employees, Mary Jo White has spoken to some of them.
Right. That's
and we'll hear from one of the former employees in just a little bit. But remember, if you're on Facebook, make sure you comment below. We're going to read some of your comments later in the show. Tweet at us. We're going to read your tweets, and we're going to answer some of your questions or just how you feel about this entire situation, period. Now, I can't tell you how many times, and we were in the Commanders' locker room today, when a story comes out about Dan Snyder and head coach Ron Rivera, and the players have to answer questions about it.
Last thing they want to talk about.
Yeah, where it's off the field issues. And today it was another distraction for the team.
I tell the guys, let's talk about what we're doing. Let's talk about what we can do, what we've done, as opposed to all the other stuff. And let's just try and stay focused. I mean, it's hard. I get it, and I understand it's a social issue, but at the same time, we're trying to play football.
You could let anything be a distraction. You have a flat tire today, that could be a distraction. It's just a matter of how much you let that stuff seep in. None of us are dumb. We know what's going on, but at the same time, how are you going to let it affect what's going on the field? And I think as players, that's what we can control.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, Terry McLaurin, probably the best spoken guy on the team. I hate to say he's our go-to, but he knows how to speak eloquently, and he knows what we're all thinking, and
he also knows what's going on,
and he
like
also
he just
knows what's
mentioned.
going on. A lot of these guys, when we talk to them, they'll say, "Oh, I'm not on social media. I don't have Twitter. I don't do that." Great. Terry McLaurin's on social media. Yeah. He sees everything. He knows what's going on. And yeah, he said anything, though, can be a distraction. You can be sick for the day. You can get in a car accident. That can be a distraction. Yeah, this is also a big distraction, but he just wants us to be able to talk about football. Getting back to that, it helps if you win some games.
In addition to that, you have Kendall Fuller, who's a local kid who plays for the Commanders. He says he's not on social media, but he told me today when he comes inside the locker room, he hears it from everybody else. So he is also
Everyone's
distracted
talking.
because of some of his teammates.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all these investigations and controversy go back years, as we've been saying, and start with former employees speaking up against the team.
Yeah, we want to hear their perspective on what's happened the past few days. So joining us right now, Megan Embert. She's a former Washington Commander employee. And Megan, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Megan, I'll just kind of dive right in. What has stood out to you about the past few days and everything that's been said?
It's been pretty overwhelming. Plus, all of us have day jobs as well. So I actually was overwhelmed by Twitter. I hadn't caught up to everything. I think a couple of things stood out to me. First of all, the Commander's attorney, I think it's been kind of utterly ridiculous listening to him. And there's multiple attorneys, right? I don't think they even know the timeline and all of it the way we have because we've lived it. So from my perspective, obviously, I'm excited that the Colts owner spoke up and did that. I'm not really surprised that everyone else kind of said no comment, but if you pay attention, no one actually said that they're siding with Dan Snyder. They've been told to wait for Mary Jo White. I think with the Beth Wilkinson investigation, which is the, behind this release the report movement, frankly, if they want to talk about this misinformation campaign or whatnot, all they have to do at any time is release the actual findings of the Wilkinson investigation. We had over 150 people participate, as you all know, and there's a common interest agreement between the NFL and the Commanders. They have full power to release those findings, and there's 6 other investigations. So I appreciate, and I told Darren earlier, I loved his tenacious ability to ask questions and get after the real truth, because frankly, this is so much bigger than football. This is a bigger issue as far as workplace decency, and it's so much bigger than the NFL. So I think it's been a little bit, overwhelming for some of us, and especially as we see, some of the defaming comments about former employees and Dan Snyder's response. The letter from Dan Snyder to the other owners, I just find some of his actions to be comical at this point, desperate, frankly. So emotions are certainly heightened. And I think we're definitely coming to a period of time where people have to choose and take a close look at the NFL, their organizations. What do they want to stand for? What do they tolerate? And I don't think society has an appetite for allowing people in power that, frankly, owning an NFL team is a privilege. And he has abused that for 20 years. So I guess emotions are just kind of heightened. And to answer your question, it's just been kind of a little overwhelming.
Megan, you've been on our show multiple times, and some of the former employees, including yourself, believe that Dan Snyder should no longer be the owner of the Washington Commanders. After listening to what Jim Irsay said yesterday, how confident or how encouraged are you after hearing that, getting closer to what you ultimately wanted?
I'm encouraged by it. It's nice that folks are finally putting their name out there. And I did listen to the Commander's attorney before I joined, and parts of what he said. I think a lot of folks don't still want to go on record because they know how litigious and retaliatory the Commander's camp is. So it's not surprising to me that there are anonymous sources, but it's also very insulting to ESPN, Washington Post, you all, anybody that's releasing news that is not agreeing with them, that they're questioning their legitimacy. So from my perspective, I have hope. I know a portion of what is in the Wilkinson report. I know portions of the Mary Jo White investigation. And if that's to come out, that I just, I know so much that I don't know how you could turn a blind eye further from this. So from my perspective, the Snyders, plural, should not be owning that team. Let's not forget they gave Tanya co-CEO ownership rights while the Wilkinson investigation was going on. That's another big misstep by the NFL.
So Megan, it would seem, it's Adam Longo, following you on social media, this is all-consuming for you, it would seem, from a social media perspective at least. And I want to hit on something you said just a moment ago, where you said it's not just about the Washington Commanders and the culture within this organization. That's a point that I've tried to convey through our coverage of the congressional investigation, that while Congress and the Oversight Committee have been looking specifically at the Commanders, it goes to this more wide discussion of the use of NDAs and the use of somebody's professional image in a workplace and how people are treated in corporate America overall. Do you feel the weight of that, in addition to just dealing with this particular issue that you have this intimate involvement with?
Yeah, I think I'm big on embracing the journey in life, and sometimes the test isn't on paper. And I've said over and over again, obviously I was terrified to come forward on record, and especially after I helped discover the fact that these explicit videos of the cheerleaders produced for owner Dan Snyder existed. And when that happened, I knew I needed to put my name on it. I knew there were risks involved, and I haven't looked back, and I've been one of the loudest ones. It is so much bigger, and I do feel the weight, and I do appreciate the Congressional Oversight Committee. I mean, people think that might be a waste of Congress's time, but there's so much, even whether it's dossiers or the fact that there might be legislation that could impact other industries and other people that might be going through this, whether it's the inappropriate use of NDAs or, like you said, inappropriate use of images. It is a bit surreal. Like, this has now become a part of my life. I'm now a part of this Me Too era. You know, that whole movement didn't start until 2017. We're still at the very beginning of that in different industries that are, you know, whether it's male dominated or certain, you know, inequities of power. But definitely, and I know for a fact, like, I've talked to some former Suns employees, a lot of people have been thanking us for what we've been able to do, but they're also watching this insane almost 2.5 years of this saga, right? And how ridiculous it is. And the fact that, you know, Dan Snyder has billions of dollars, and I think I read somewhere one law firm he's paying over $500,000 a month. That's what we're up against. And we've said from the beginning, you know, if change is going to happen, we have to risk, whether it's NDAs or not taking a paycheck from him or his law firms, whoever, in order for change to happen. And if you look back in history, it's the people that are really willing to put a risk and putting their name to it, their life to it, where change can actually happen. And you know, those videos, that it always comes back to me, there's not enough attention drawn to that. I have a niece, she does dance, you know, she might want to be a cheerleader one day or whatever. It's just, it's so sickening and disgusting, and that's the highest level of professional sports. So I don't want to see people getting exploited. I believe that workplaces should value decency, and their culture matters, and it does stem from the top. And the narrative on blaming Bruce Allen is, again, ridiculous. Bruce Allen wasn't there until 2009, I think. The allegations definitely went before then for Dan Snyder. So all of the things that his camp are saying, it's just complete deflection. And I can assure you, I wouldn't have wanted to disrupt my life for 2.5 years, or people like Melanie that are now being defamed by him. We would not put ourselves out there if this stuff was not true.
When I was younger, I always heard this story where it's like his side or her side, and then there's the truth. And I think with this investigation, or multiple investigations that are going to come out, we're going to eventually hear the truth. So we can look forward to that at one particular time. But Megan, I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for joining us, hearing kind of both perspectives on this. So we appreciate your insight.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
All right. So
appreciate it.
So we have a lot to talk about, you guys, and joining us right now, the Rooster, Chris Russell, the host of Locked On Commanders podcast, is going to join us right now. Chris, are you there? Oh, Chris isn't there. So while we wait for Chris to show up, let's quickly wrap on what we heard from Megan Imbert, former Washington Commander employee.
I think she, oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
No, I just think, you know, kind of at the end when she wrapped, and, you know, she said, it hasn't been easy being one of the ones that's not anonymous, like being the one that is up there and you're putting your name and you're putting your face on this. And she said it hasn't been fun. It hasn't been easy, and kind of saying, I wouldn't be doing this if I really didn't feel that it was my truth.
One thing that's hard to ignore, though, is that Megan and other employees like her have been sharing their truth for some time now,
Correct.
years.
Right.
It is not until this becomes financial with allegations
Right.
of shifting the money around, possibly allegations of taking money from other owners, the lack of popularity among the team driving its value down, which also takes money out of owners' pockets.
Stadium as well.
Stadium as well. All those things may be impacting the owners finally coming forward and saying we have to do something as well, which is pretty sad that when it was people on the line, they could live with it. When it was their money on the line, now we got to do something.
Yeah, Melanie Coburn and Megan just last week were talking about that they share their stories. They consider it so exhausting to constantly share their story. And it all comes down to the only way maybe something could happen with Dan Snyder is if he can get a new stadium.
Yeah. Should we bring in the rooster?
Yeah, let's
Is
bring
it
in the
time?
rooster. Chris, are you there?
There's Chris.
Guys.
Hey.
How are you?
Chris.
Good to be on with you.
Good. Listen, we're gonna talk about the team a little bit, but like we were just all talking about the Dan Snyder investigation. I mean, give me your quick take on this investigation, especially what we just heard from Jim Irsay, Colts owner.
Yeah, I mean, Darren, you were there right next to him. So, I mean, you know, you got the firsthand feel, but I felt like the venom and the heat coming from Jim Irsay's mouth, almost like a dragon, you know, blowing fire. And I felt every bit of it. And I do truly feel this is super, super, super significant. Obviously, it's the first owner on the record. It made me wonder if Jim Irsay's been the one kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes all along.
Absolutely.
And he just said it. You know, on the record, which is great. I think for anybody that's on the side of this organization never really sustainably improving until Dan Snyder is out of here, yesterday's developments were enormous.
Chris, do you think, it's Adam Longo, do you think Roger Goodell talked about the Mary Jo White investigation and how, you know, some of the other owners say we're going to wait for that to be the impetus before we decide what we do. Do you believe any of the NFL owners care or are paying attention to the congressional investigation of the House Oversight Committee? I mean, we're likely here within the next 2 months to see some sort of work product or resolution from that investigation.
Adam, I think they care when it's convenient for them, and when it's not convenient for them, they don't give a you-know-what. So here's how I would answer it. I talked about this on my radio show on Wednesday morning. You know, Roger Goodell said, no, we don't offer midterm updates or mid-investigation reports or however he said it. So we have no comment. And then literally a couple of minutes later, he's asked, hey, did you have any problem? Were you surprised by what Jim Irsay said? He said, nope. I mean, if he had a problem, if we can't talk about it, then why is he sanctioning Jim Irsay saying what he said and not having a problem with it? Why is he not saying, well, I wish, you know, Jim Irsay would have waited for the facts or whatever he basically told the media at first. So to me, something doesn't add up here. And what I think it is I think Roger Goodell is absolutely exhausted from dealing with Dan Snyder and Jerry Jones and has been for a while. And he'll never admit this, but I think privately Raj is pumping his fist and going, yeah, attaboy, Jim.
Hey, Rooster, it's Flack. We talked about this before you joined us. I just wanted to get your take on it as well. Will winning cure all with this team at this point? Can we put the toothpaste back in the tube and see a day where Dan Snyder is the owner of the Washington Commanders and we go back to Shangri-La and it's all fine?
Yeah, Eric, I think you would have to win sexy, and win significantly in order for that to happen. And I mean, you know, 12 wins a year on average, 11 wins a year on average, whatever it would be for a good amount of time, and a Super Bowl trip, a Super Bowl championship and a new stadium and a lot less controversy and not this daily drama that we all deal with, whether we're media or whether we're fans or whether we're customers. I think that's the only way it can happen. Do I ever see that happening? No. I'm just going to be honest. I mean, maybe you'll have an occasional magic carpet ride like this organization has had under Dan, where they squeeze backdoor style into the playoffs or whatever it might be. But you're going to always have the dysfunction. You're going to always have the drama. You're always going to have all this nonsense that we all have to deal with and all have to absorb. And you just don't get to offset it by, again, the winning. Like if this was Pittsburgh or New England or whatever, you could deal with it and say, well, listen, they win. They don't win. And they're dreadfully boring, too.
Chris, it is so much fun to chat with you. I know Darren and I
You
get
are
to
not
chat
boring.
with you all the time. But yeah, this is
I love you guys.
Stay with us if you can while we wrap up this show. But for now, thank you so much. It has been great getting your very honest insight.
Oh, we want to hear some more of that. Just stick around.
Appreciate you guys.
And you can listen to the Locked On Commanders podcast by pointing your phone's camera. We have a QR code for you right there. It's coming up. You can also search Locked On Commanders wherever you get your podcasts or watch on YouTube at WUSA9 Plus. There it is. That QR code right there. Point your phone right there, and you can get a lot more of Chris.
And this is a perfect segue, Charla, because this next story actually originated when the guy called in to Chris's radio show earlier today. Let's get to a different type of dysfunction with the team. A Commanders season ticket holder says he has won the team's 50-50 raffle. Great. You're in the stadium, you get half the money, the charity gets the other half. Awesome. Here's the problem. He says he went to cash the $14,000 check the Commanders sent him, and we can confirm tonight that check bounced. That's right. The Washington Commanders wrote a $14,000 check to a fan that bounced. I wrapped up an interview with that fan earlier today. We should say right off the top, the team did resolve this mess just today. But with everything else going on, you have to look at this and just say, seriously? Drew Shipley won more than $14,800 in the Commanders' 50-50 raffle during the team's Week 1 win back in September. Shipley said after more than a month had passed without being paid his prize money by the Commanders, he twice tweeted the team right there asking for his winnings, then called his ticket rep demanding the Commanders make good. So they sent a $14,822 check right there to the Shipley's home. It arrived last Thursday. He deposits the check. Great, right? Not so much. This morning he finds out the Commanders' check bounced. I cannot make this up, putting his bank account in the negative and leaving him with, get this, icing on top, a $15 bad check fee.
I hate those check bills.
I mean, seriously.
I remember those back
We've
in
all
college.
been there, yeah. A Washington Commanders spokesman today confirmed the team wrote a bad check, adding, quote, "We reached out directly to the fan as soon as we learned about it and have wired the money directly to his account. We apologize for the inconvenience. I spoke with the fan just this afternoon."
Man, it was quite shocking, quite maddening. Like you said, it took this long to get it.
Are you telling me the Washington Commanders sent you a $14,000 check that bounced?
I am telling you that is exactly what happened.
But considering everything that's going on with the team right now, how does this happen?
You got to do the small things right? Like you have big enough scandals from the top of your organization that you got to do the little things right. You got to retain your customers. I have a hard time now, like thinking about spending $1 at FedEx Field from here on.
I might argue, guys, that a $14,000 prize check to a fan is not a little thing.
Yeah.
The Commanders blamed the bounced check on a bank error and told us they are following up with the bank to learn why it happened and ensure it doesn't happen again. Shipley said the bounced prize check only adds to an underwhelming experience he has had as a Commanders season ticket holder.
He's a season ticket holder.
How does
That's
that
a coded
happen?
message for his ticket rep right there.
So I'm just a normal guy. I walk into the bank. I write checks or whatever, and I'm just a little bit confused how on one side the bad check, like what check are they writing wrong when they probably write checks all the time, like they pay their players and those are checks.
I think they have a massive account.
And then you have a bank that knows, hey, this is the Washington Commanders, one of the most,
It's a professional football team.
They're worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
They're worth a lot of money. So you'll think a lot of transactions will take place that are more than $14,000. How this error can actually happen?
It's confusing to everybody. A lot of fans. I mean, it has lit up social media.
Like who do they bank with? What's the bank?
He took it to his credit union. The check, what happens when you get a check that big, the bank credit union says, we're going to float you a little bit of this because it says Washington Commanders on the check, so we figure it's going to be okay. And then it gets processed and it comes back,
Let's get Rooster to weigh in on this. What are you thinking?
Yeah,
when
you
first
broke
heard
this.
about this.
Is Chris there? Because, I got this off your airwaves.
He has a mic in the hand ready to go.
Tell me about this.
I'm here, guys. This was shocking because this was, after 2 hours of Dandy Dan talk, right? And Jim Irsay blasting Dan, like this came out of the blue, and we just got a caller, a friend who alerted us this at about 11:05 on Wednesday morning, and we were like, okay, well, maybe this is true. Let's ask some questions. We put him off air to get more information from him. And then we called his friend, the one that actually won, the check, the one that you spoke to, Eric. Then he came on the air with us at like 11:35 and explained the whole thing, gave us some more detail, and provided some of the material that you guys just showed and had in your report, the check and the envelope and whatever. And then we mentioned it, of course, on Twitter and then on the air. And just as I was doing an interview with our sister station, 106.7 The Fan, the Commanders issued that statement right while I was doing that. And I was even surprised that they were acknowledging, oh, wow, this is correct. Wait a second. They bounced a $14,000 check. You would think that a team that's worth $5 billion would be able to cover
would have enough in the account to cover it. Hey, have the Patriots bounced any 50-50 raffle checks recently, Rooster?
Well, and here's the other thing, guys, that's been pointed out on Twitter. I don't know if you guys have thought about this, not to diminish anything, but that means that only like 29-ish thousand was sold. Most football games, you're probably going to get a lot more than that in other markets. I think the Eagles last Sunday night for the Cowboys game had like $120,000 worth of total sales in their 50-50 raffles, which means the winner got like 60.
They're getting that 50-50 at like the Cap Center. I mean,
Right.
Wow.
Rooster, I'm just curious real quick, just your take, because it seems like every single week there's a new story, and these stories are just like outrageous and just like, when would this ever happen? Or how could this ever happen? And it happens here in D.C. with the Washington Commanders. How would you describe some of these things that this team goes through where they never seem to catch a break?
Darren, I mean, I've been around here for 16 years. I worked for Dan, I guess, in the building 275 days a year for 5 seasons, right, under Mike Shanahan and partially under Jay Gruden. I never, ever, ever, ever thought it could get worse than some of those days with Robert Griffin and Donovan McNabb and Albert Hainsworth. And guys, I mean, for those of us that have been here for a while, what has happened since Ron took over this organization, I'm not blaming Ron. He's had an enormous amount to deal with. I couldn't even begin to process how much worse it is than what we already had dealt with, over the many years of, again, Albert Hainsworth and Donovan McNabb and Robert Griffin and Dan Snyder and Bruce Allen and all that stuff.
Wow. It's been a lot. Okay, stick around. We're not done yet. But we have people weighing in who are watching us on Facebook, so we want to get to some of your comments. Those of you, we're going to start with Judy. She says, how do they remove him as the owner? That's a great question. And, of course, we've talked about that in previous reports, but we haven't brought that up tonight. Yep. Who wants to take this one?
I could take it. Okay. You need 24 out of the 32 owners. They have a vote, and we mentioned even in our newscast that they have an owners meeting that's going to come up in West Palm Beach in March. Mm-hmm. Let's just say some of the investigation, the reports are out, and they want to have that vote. They can have that in March.
They could call it on the spot.
Well, they'll put it on the agenda.
And
it'll be one of the topics that they talk about. I find it hard where they're just like, hey guys, we're at the meeting. Hey, let's have this vote real quick, right? I think that's something that they'll put on the agenda if they feel like it's time to do so. Mm-hmm.
And that's not something that happens every day. Putting that on the agenda to remove an owner is
but we heard Jim Irsay
that's why the Irsay comments were so huge.
Correct, because it now
told
us that is now a possible thing that could happen.
You have at least one person thinking it. That's one of the 24.
And for them to say it publicly says a lot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, so Rooster, was that you who wanted to comment? Was that?
No. I agree with what you guys just said, and I'll tell you this: I'm already booking my vacation for West Palm Beach.
Ready.
Maybe we're going to break out that parade down in South FLA if we can get this resolved and all move on with our lives. Because quite honestly, guys, I don't want to see anybody lose their team if it's not deserving. But even if a lot of this stuff can't be proven, with video or audio or what have you by Mary Jo White and the ongoing investigation and the attorneys generals and all that stuff and Congress, even if it can't, how much is enough for the NFL where they say every other day there's a song and a dance, there's a different accusation, there's a different drama. And, oh, by the way, think about this, guys. One last thing from me, at least on this. When I showed up here, and I believe it was all the way through the 2011 season roughly, there were 91,000 people going to games last year.
I remember.
And I understand we were in a post-pandemic year. They averaged 51,000 plus. Think about that. 40,000 less people going to games.
Chris, the question has to be, and we haven't brought this up, why does Dan Snyder want to continue to be the owner?
Pride.
I mean, he's made
egomaniac.
He's made how much money has the team increased in value over the time that he's been the owner? Lawsuits, NDAs, multiple investigations, the fan base, the media. It's like, why not just say, okay, I'm done.
He would be
listen. If you can make more money, why would you want to give that up?
Yeah, it's a cash cow.
No, I'm not.
It's
Listen,
a cash cow.
if I know my family's going to be good for multiple generations, Adam, I'm not gonna give up the team when I know that it's one of the it's my franchise is worth a lot of money, and I'm making more money as the years go along, despite the product on the field being horrible.
He's in a great situation where he can fail upward as long as they will let him.
All right, so Sonia says it's difficult. One of our comments says it's difficult when there are multiple owners. Good luck to them. I hope they make the right decision. I guess
I think he's speaking to the fact that, listen, Irsay is one of 24, and there's a lot of other owners who have to grab and come forward and say this is the right thing to do.
Joseph Howell Jr. says the public has seen what this organization has produced since Snyder's ownership. That's why we want him to sell. He doesn't have a lot of supporters other than people that are on his payroll.
No, and I think when you're a billionaire, you are very impressed with yourself. You do not admit defeat, and I think if and when he is eventually forced to sell the team, if that day comes, it will be one of the darkest days of his life. Not financially, but because this franchise that he bought as a childhood fan, I was a childhood fan, this is my team, I'm going to continue the greatness that I fell in love with. It will be the final nail in the coffin that he did exactly the opposite. He ruined it. He ruined it.
I think
you know what's interesting, guys, is, and I don't know if it could come to this, but if, say, he were to get voted out, whether, as Darren mentioned, down in Palm Beach, in March, or maybe it's the next league meeting after that, whatever the case might be, if he gets voted out, is he allowed to transfer ownership of the team just solely and exclusively to Tanya, and meaning keeping it in the family? And is that allowed? I don't know if it is.
Let me help you with that. So what I found was very interesting was I first noticed it at the Carson Wentz presser where Tanya was there, and I believe their son was also there. And I was like, okay, I think they're now setting this stage where we see Tanya around, and it's just going to be that transfer of ownership or power or whatever just to Tanya, and Dan Snyder is out. But yesterday, when Jim Irsay was mentioning about, hey, he was directly asked, does it stay with the Snyder family, or does he sell the team? Meaning the Snyder family does not own the team at all. And he said the Snyders would sell will sell the team, meaning someone else would take over. It would not be Dan, or would not even be Tanya.
Keep in mind, the NFL, the NFL and the owners is the most exclusive club in the world. The club has to approve its new members, just as they have the right to vote them out. They have to approve whoever is going to take over, and they would absolutely not approve.
Right, absolutely. This has been a lot to unpack. We've thrown a lot at you guys. Chris, you have been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rooster.
Again, the Locked On Podcast. You can always listen to Chris. He's fantastic. We appreciate your honesty, and we appreciate all of our guests on this show. Megan, of course, John Brownlee. It's been a lot. And you can keep watching this again on WUSA9+.
Yeah, if there's one thing that we all know that we can all agree on, this is not over. This story has so many different facets, so many legs. We'll be having another conversation like this very soon.
Absolutely. We have the two investigations, the Oversight Committee's investigation, that's going to be a written report, and then we have the Mary Jo White investigation, that's going to also be a written report. So we may be here two or three more times.
And the part that just scares me as a lifelong Washingtonian, lifelong fan of this team is that Rooster said, back in the day, we didn't think it could get any worse, but now we're here. Can it get any worse? Have we hit rock bottom? I've heard us say it's been rock bottom so many times.
Yeah.
Is this really rock bottom?
Where is the bottom?
I mean, I'm just falling there.
Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, we have Eric Flack, I'm Darren Haynes, Charlotte McBride, and Adam Longo breaking it all down. And we'll do this again. So appreciate you guys for joining us on the latest on the Washington Commanders and the investigation of owner Dan Snyder.